She sat in the front pew wearing midnight silk, a drop of ink in a sea of pristine white lace. The bride's mother leaned over, her whisper sharp enough to cut glass. "Does Giovanni think this is a brothel? Tell the help to wait in the car." Before we dive deeper into this story, make sure to subscribe. New stories unfold here every day, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one. And don't forget to comment which state you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in. The story opens in media res at the height of the social collision. It immediately establishes the danger Dominique navigates, not mere social rejection, but a powder keg of mob disrespect that could ignite a war. It contrasts her sleek, understated elegance with the garish, suffocating opulence of the Rossi family's criminal empire. The narrator hints at the deadly irony to come. The guests see a vulnerable target, an outsider who doesn't belong, but the audience is told she is the apex predator in a room full of stray dogs. This creates razor-sharp tension. We know something these mobsters don't, and we're waiting not just for a comeuppance, but for an execution of absolute power. The insults aren't just cruel. They're death sentences, signed by people too arrogant to read the fine print. The estate sprawled across the hillside like a monument to excess. White marble columns wrapped in gold ribbon, fountains spitting champagne instead of water, and enough roses to choke a florist. Dominique's black SUV glided through the gates, past security, who didn't bother checking the vehicle. They should have. She emerged in a dress the color of fresh blood. The silk clung to her like a second skin, sleeveless and severe, cut with the precision of a surgical blade. No jewelry except a single ring on her right hand, black onyx set in platinum, so dark it seemed to swallow light. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, smooth as obsidian. She wore her beauty like a weapon, elegant, lethal, impossible to ignore. The sprawling lawn had been transformed into a ceremony space, dripping with white peonies and gold-leafed everything. Guests milled about in their designer funeral wear, black tuxedos, tasteful pastels, the occasional brave soul in navy. They looked like they were attending a wedding or negotiating a ceasefire. In this world, it was often the same thing. Then Dominique stepped onto the cobblestone path. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned with the mechanical precision of security cameras tracking movement. A woman in pearls clutched her champagne flute so hard the stem cracked. Two men in expensive suits exchanged glances that said the same thing. "Who the hell is that?" She walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet, each step deliberate, unhurried. The red dress was a declaration of war in a sea of diplomatic neutrals. It said, "I am not here to blend in. I am here to be remembered." A cluster of mob wives near the fountain stopped pretending to admire the floral arrangements. Their whispers carried on the breeze like poison. "Is that her? Giovanni's bringing her here? She's got nerve, I'll give her that." Nerve or stupidity? Dominique heard every word. She always did, but her expression remained glacial, bored even. As if she were attending an auction for things she already owned. Gio materialized at her side, his ivory suit almost glowing in the afternoon sun. He offered his arm with the desperate courtesy of a man who knew he was juggling grenades. She took it, more to steady him than herself. "They're staring," he muttered under his breath. "They should be." "Dom, maybe we should—" "Keep walking, Giovanni." They moved through the crowd like a knife through silk. Guests parted without realizing they were doing it. Some ancient instinct recognizing apex predation even when it wore Louboutins. The air around her seemed colder, sharper, as if she carried her own atmosphere. Near the entrance to the ceremony space, Dominique paused. She surveyed the assembled crime families with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. These people thought they were lions. They had no idea they were already in the lioness's mouth. Carmela Rossi descended the terrace steps like a queen surveying peasants, her gold lame gown catching the sunlight with all the subtlety of a billboard. The dress was encrusted with enough beading to fund a small country, cut low enough to showcase the diamond necklace that probably had. Her hair was teased into submission, sprayed into a helmet that could survive a Category 5 hurricane. She wore her wealth like armor, loud and impossible to miss. She was also impossible to ignore. "Giovanni!" Her voice cut across the lawn like a foghorn, sharp enough to shatter the string quartet's Mozart into discordant squeaks. Guests flinched. The musicians lost their place. "Giovanni Moretti! You come here right now." Dominique felt Gio's arm tense beneath her fingers. She released him with the barest pressure, a silent command. "Handle this." He moved forward with the reluctant shuffle of a man approaching a firing squad. "Carmela, buongiorno, you look—" "Save it." Carmela planted herself in front of him, hands on her substantial hips, blocking his path like a jewel-encrusted bouncer. Her eyes, sharp and mean, flicked past Gio to land on Dominique with all the warmth of a snake eyeing a mouse. "Why is she here? This isn't a nightclub, Giovanni. This is my daughter's wedding." The emphasis on wedding carried the weight of a threat. Gio opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mrs. Rossi, she's my—" "Your what?" Carmela's laugh was harsh, ugly, designed to humiliate. "Your date? Your companion?" She leaned in, dropping her voice to a stage whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the lawn. "Listen, I don't care what you do in your private time, but you don't bring your entertainment to a family event. Show some respect." The word entertainment dripped with venom, each syllable a loaded gun. Around them, the whispering intensified. Phones appeared. Someone would be texting their crew about this by nightfall. In this world, disrespect was currency, and Carmela was spending it like she had an unlimited supply. Dominique stood perfectly still, her face an elegant mask of indifference. She could have been carved from marble for all the reaction she showed. But anyone who knew her, truly knew her, would have noticed the slight tilt of her head, the way her thumb brushed across that black onyx ring. She was cataloging, calculating, deciding. Carmela turned back to Gio, jabbing a finger into his chest. "You want to marry into this family? You want access to our connections, our territory, our respect? Then you follow our rules." She jerked her head toward Dominique without looking at her. "Tell your friend to wait in the car, or better yet, send her home. The adults have business to conduct." Gio's face flushed crimson. His hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun everyone knew was there. Dominique's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Quiet, controlled, lethal. "Giovanni, don't." Francesca Rossi emerged from the bridal suite like a vision dipped in cream and dusted with diamonds. The wedding dress was a masterpiece, Italian lace, hand-beaded bodice, a train that required 2 attendants to carry. Her veil floated behind her like a cloud, her makeup airbrushed to porcelain perfection. She looked like every little girl's fantasy, every magazine cover's promise. She also looked furious. "Mother!" The bride's voice cracked across the lawn with the petulance of someone accustomed to getting her way. She gathered her skirts and stormed toward Carmela with surprising speed, her bridesmaids scrambling to keep up. The carefully orchestrated bridal entrance was abandoned in favor of a temper tantrum. "Mother, what is that doing here?" That didn't require clarification. Frankie stopped 3 feet from Dominique, close enough to make her territorial claim but far enough to maintain plausible seniority. Her blue eyes swept over the red dress with the kind of assessment women reserve for perceived threats, calculating, venomous, afraid, because that's what this was, fear dressed up as indignation. "Gio." Frankie's voice dripped with practiced sweetness, the kind that preceded poison. "Baby? We talked about the guest list. We agreed. Family and appropriate associates only." She emphasized appropriate, the way someone might emphasize diseased. "This is my day. My wedding. And she's—" A delicate gesture toward Dominique, fingers fluttering like she couldn't bear to point directly. "She's ruining my aesthetic." One of the bridesmaids snickered. Another whispered something that made them all giggle, a sound like breaking glass. Carmela placed a meaty hand on her daughter's shoulder, maternal solidarity in gold and diamonds. "Don't worry, Angel, I'm handling it." You need to handle it faster. Frankie's voice climbed an octave, the bride's carefully maintained composure cracking around the edges. Look at her, that dress, standing there like she belongs here. Her voice dropped to a hiss that somehow carried to every gossiping guest. People are staring. They're taking pictures. Everyone's going to remember her instead of me. On my day. The truth, naked and ugly, Frankie knew exactly what she looked like standing next to Dominique. She knew who would be remembered when this wedding became cocktail party gossip, and she couldn't stand it. Move her to the back, Frankie commanded, snapping her fingers at the security detail stationed near the entrance. Or better yet, have her removed entirely. Tell her the venue is at capacity. Tell her whatever you want, just get her out of my sight. Dominique still hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. She stood there like a statue carved from midnight and malice, watching the bride unravel with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a particularly fascinating specimen. The security guards looked at Gio, then at Carmela, then at the woman in red, who somehow made 6'2" enforcers nervous without saying a word. Nobody moved. The priest cleared his throat, a nervous sound that echoed through the suddenly silent garden. Father Benedetto had officiated 43 mob weddings in his career. He knew when to speak and when to pretend he'd gone deaf. Right now, he was opting for the former, hoping ceremony would restore order. Please, everyone take your seats. We are ready to begin. The guests shuffled into their assigned positions with the reluctant obedience of children sent to their rooms. The white chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an altar drowning in roses and gold ribbon. Reserved signs marked the front rows, family only, the inner circle, the people who mattered. Dominique walked directly to the third row on the groom's side and sat. No hesitation, no apology. She simply claimed the space as if it had always belonged to her. The collective intake of breath was audible. An elderly capo 2 rows back crossed himself. A woman in pearls actually gasped, pressing manicured fingers to her chest like she'd witnessed a cardinal sin. The reserved sign that had been on that seat lay discarded on the grass, trampled under a Louboutin heel. Gio slid into the seat beside her, his face a portrait of barely controlled panic. Dom, maybe we should… Sit, Giovanni. He sat. Across the aisle, Carmela's face had gone the color of her gold dress, a mottled, furious bronze. She stood in the front row, mother of the bride corsage, pinned to her considerable chest, whispering furiously to a man built like a refrigerator in an ill-fitting suit. He had the flat eyes of a career enforcer, the kind of man who made problems disappear. The refrigerator nodded. His hand drifted toward his jacket. 2 more men flanked him, materializing from the crowd with the practiced ease of professionals. They all wore the same expression, cold calculation, the mental math of violence. 3 against 1 woman, easy odds. Father Benedetto began the processional prayer, his voice shaking slightly. The string quartet launched into Pachelbel's canon, the notes trembling in the afternoon air. Bridesmaids began their choreographed walk down the aisle, all forced smiles and pastel tulle. Nobody was watching them. Every eye in that garden was either on Dominique or on the men slowly moving into position around her. The atmosphere had shifted from wedding to war room, the air thick with the electricity that precedes violence. Dominique sat with her legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, looking for all the world like she was attending a particularly boring board meeting. The only sign she'd noticed the circling predators was the slight smile playing at the corner of her lips, not amusement, not nervousness, anticipation. Gio's hand moved to his jacket. She placed her hand over his, stopping him with pressure so gentle it could have been affectionate. To anyone watching, it looked like a tender gesture between companions. "Not yet," she murmured. Her voice barely audible under the swelling music. "Let them dig deeper." The bride appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white and rage. The ceremony began. Father Benedetto reached the sacred moment, opening his worn leather Bible with trembling hands. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God, and these witnesses to join Giovanni Moretti and Francesca Rossi in holy matrimony. Stop! Carmela erupted from her seat like a volcano in gold lame, her voice shattering the ceremony into jagged pieces. The string quartet's bows screeched to a halt. A bridesmaid dropped her bouquet. Somewhere in the back, a champagne glass hit the ground and exploded. The priest froze mid-sentence, his mouth hanging open. "Stop this right now!" Carmela's finger shot out, pointing at Dominique with the accusatory weight of a loaded weapon. "I have tolerated this disrespect long enough. Get that woman out of my sight, out of my daughter's wedding, out!" The last word echoed across the garden like a gunshot. Frankie stood at the altar in her pristine white gown, veil thrown back, her face cycling through shock, humiliation, and vindictive satisfaction. She didn't stop her mother. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, watching. Gio rose from his seat, his face drained of color. "Mrs. Rossi, please, let's not—" "Sit down, Giovanni." Carmela whirled on him with the fury of a woman who'd been disobeyed. "You want to join this family? You want my daughter? Then you will show us respect." She turned back to Dominique, her chest heaving. "Security! Security!" The three men who'd been circling moved in with practiced efficiency. The refrigerator-shaped enforcer stepped into the aisle, blocking any exit. His two companions flanked Dominique's row from both sides, close enough now that guests could see the bulges under their jackets. The garden went tomb silent. 200 guests held their breath. Phones appeared, recording devices raised like weapons of their own. This would be tonight's story, tomorrow's legend. The day a woman was dragged from a mob wedding. The day Giovanni Moretti's whore learned her place. Except Dominique still hadn't moved. She sat there in that blood-red dress, hands folded in her lap, looking up at Carmela with an expression of such profound boredom it bordered on contempt. Not fear, not anger, just patience. The kind of patience predators have before they strike. "Ma'am?" The refrigerator's voice was gravel in Brooklyn. "You need to leave. Now." His hand landed on Dominique's shoulder. Gio's gun cleared his holster with the metallic whisper of well-oiled steel. He pointed it directly at the enforcer's head, his hand steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Touch her again and you die where you stand." The other two guards drew their weapons, 3 guns now, all pointed at Gio. The priest stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his robes. Carmela smiled, a vicious, triumphant thing. "Last chance, Giovanni. Her or us." Giovanni Moretti stood in the aisle with his gun raised, and for the first time in 10 years of serving the syndicate, he looked lost. His eyes moved from the enforcer's flat stare to Carmela's triumphant sneer, then to Francesca at the altar. His bride was crying, mascara tracking down her perfect makeup like ink in rain. Her bouquet hung limp in her hands, white roses wilting in real time. She looked beautiful and broken and furious all at once. "Gio," her voice cracked. "Baby, please, just make her leave. We can fix this, we can still—" "Frankie." His voice was barely audible. "Please." The word came out as a sob. "I love you, don't do this. Don't choose her over me, over us, over our future." For a moment, one terrible, suspended moment, something flickered across Gio's face. Regret, maybe. Or the ghost of the man who'd actually wanted this marriage, this legitimacy, this chance at something normal. Then his eyes found Dominique. She hadn't moved. Hadn't flinched when the guard grabbed her shoulder. Hadn't reacted when guns were drawn. She simply sat there, waiting, with that same expression of infinite patience. But her eyes, those dark, bottomless eyes, held a question only Gio could answer. "Who are you?" And suddenly, with terrible clarity, Gio remembered. He remembered the night Dominique found him bleeding out in a Warsaw alley, left for dead by men who'd underestimated him. She'd carried him to safety herself, stitched his wounds with her own hands, rebuilt him from nothing into something dangerous. He remembered the empire she'd handed him, the territories, the respect, the power to make men twice his age bow their heads. He remembered every lesson she'd taught him. Loyalty is the only currency that matters. Respect is earned in blood. And weakness, Giovanni, is a terminal condition. He looked at Carmela, at her cruel smile and her diamond-crusted arrogance. At Frankie, who'd just stood there while her mother hurled insults at the woman who owned their supply chains, their distribution networks, their entire operation. They didn't know. They had no idea who they were threatening. But Gio knew, and that knowledge made his choice sickeningly simple. He lowered his gun slowly, deliberately. Not surrendering, reorienting. He turned to face the altar, facing his bride for what he knew would be the last time. "I'm sorry, Francesca." His voice was steady now, cold with certainty. "This wedding is over." The garden erupted in gasps and frantic whispers. Frankie's face crumpled. "What?" "I can't marry into a family that doesn't understand respect." Gio's eyes moved to Carmela. And something deadly flickered there. That doesn't recognize power when it's sitting in their midst. He holstered his gun and extended his hand to Dominique. She took it, rising with liquid grace. "You're making a mistake!" Carmela shrieked, her face purple with rage. "You walk away from this family! You walk away from everything!" Dominique finally spoke, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. "No, Mrs. Rossi, you've made the mistake." Gio turned his back on the altar, on the bride, on the future he'd thought he wanted. He walked the 3 steps to where Dominique stood and did something that made 200 mobsters collectively stop breathing. He dropped to one knee. Not the romantic kind. This was different. Deeper. His head bowed, his right fist pressed to his chest in the old way. The gesture that predated countries and laws. The gesture that meant only one thing in their world. Fealty. "I apologize, boss." His voice carried across the silent garden, each word a detonation. "They are not worthy of the syndicate. They never were." The word boss hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Carmela's triumphant expression fractured. Her eyes widened, darting from Gio's kneeling form to Dominique's face, searching for the punchline, the mistake, the explanation that would make this make sense. Then she saw the ring. It was small, easy to miss if you didn't know what you were looking at. Black onyx set in platinum, carved with a symbol so old most people had forgotten what it meant. But Carmela knew. Every made person in that garden knew. The Red Sovereign, the mark of the High Council, the Inner Circle. The people who controlled the global underworld like puppet masters pulling strings. The people you didn't cross. Ever. The people you didn't insult. The people you certainly didn't threaten to have removed from your daughter's wedding. Carmela's face went from purple to white in the span of a heartbeat. Her mouth opened and closed, working soundlessly like a fish drowning in air. The color drained from her so fast she swayed on her feet. "No." The word came out as a whisper. "No, that's not. You're not." Dominique raised her hand slowly, letting the afternoon sun catch the ring, letting every person in that garden see what they'd been too blind to notice before. Carmela's legs gave out. She went down like a building in a controlled demolition, first to her knees, then folding forward until her forehead pressed against the grass at Dominique's feet. Her gold dress pooled around her like molten metal, her diamond necklace dragging in the dirt. "Boss!" Her voice cracked. All the arrogance burned away, leaving only naked terror. "Boss, please! I didn't know. I swear on my life I didn't know. Have mercy. Please. Please." The refrigerator and his companions had their weapons lowered, faces ashen. One of them was shaking. Around the garden, men and women who'd built empires on violence and intimidation suddenly found fascinating things to look at. Their shoes, the sky, anything but the woman in red, and the matriarch groveling at her feet. Frankie stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet falling from nerveless fingers. Dominique looked down at Carmela with the cold appraisal of a monarch observing an insect. "Mercy," she repeated softly, tasting the word. "You want mercy." Dominique let the silence stretch, let it pull taut like wire about to snap. Every second she remained silent was another second Carmela spent contemplating her mortality. The woman's shoulders shook, Whether from fear or the effort of holding the prostrate position, it was impossible to tell. Finally, Dominique spoke, her voice carrying the kind of quiet that demanded attention more than any shout ever could. "You were right, Carmela." The older woman's head jerked up slightly, hope and confusion warring on her tear-stained face. "This is no place for me." Dominique's gaze swept across the assembled guests, across the altar drowning in roses, across the bride standing frozen in her $1,000 dress. "A woman of my position shouldn't be subjected to such provincial hospitality, such limited vision." She adjusted her ring with deliberate slowness, letting the gesture sink in. "Giovanni." "Yes, boss." Gio rose fluidly, positioning himself at her right shoulder, the traditional place of a lieutenant, a guardian, a servant. "We're leaving." She said it like she was commenting on the weather. "This wedding is cancelled, the merger is dissolved, the Rossi family's request for expanded territory is denied." Each sentence fell like an axe. Effective immediately, their supply lines will be audited. Every shipment, every transaction, every dollar. Carmela made a sound like a dying animal. "Please." The words scraped from her throat. "Please, boss. My family, we can make this right, we'll do anything." "You already did everything," Dominique said softly. "You showed me exactly who you are." She stepped around Carmela's prostrate form with the care someone might take avoiding a puddle. Gio followed, his hand resting on his jacket, not threatening, just ready. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, guests scrambling backward to clear a path, their faces masks of terror and fascination. Dominique walked down that aisle with the same unhurried grace she'd entered with, her red dress a flag of conquest. Behind her, Carmela remained on the ground, gold lame soaking up grass stains and humiliation. The enforcers hadn't moved. The priest had his hands clasped in prayer, whether for the Rossis or himself was unclear. At the entrance, Dominique paused and turned back one last time. Her eyes found Francesca at the altar. The bride stood alone, abandoned by her groom, her wedding in ruins around her like a bombed cathedral. Mascara streaked her face. Her veil hung crooked. She looked small and lost and utterly destroyed. Dominique held her gaze for one long moment, letting the lesson sink in. This is what happens when you mistake elegance for weakness. When you confuse silence for submission. When you forget that the most dangerous predators never need to roar. Then she turned and walked away, Gio at her side, leaving nothing behind but wreckage and whispered legends. The black SUV was waiting. They climbed in, and the door shut with the finality of a coffin lid. The engine purred to life, and they disappeared down the long driveway, leaving the Rossi estate and its shattered dreams in the rearview mirror. Thank you for staying with me till the very end of this story. Every view, every comment, every moment you spend here keeps these stories alive. If you felt this one, make sure to subscribe and let me know you watched to the end.